So for this session, what I want to go through is sort of administration and cash flow. And the thing I will say about admin is you can pay 10, £15 an hour to get somebody to do an administration task. And as the entrepreneur, as the investor, as the one driving the business, your time is worth a hell of a lot more than 10 to £15 per hour. Now you have to appreciate this, and you've got to put a value on your own time. And anything less than that, you need to be farming out. Now, I know at the beginning of business, it's always a bit difficult to say, I don't want to incur those costs because you might not have the revenue coming in. But what is happening is they're preventing more revenue. Those tasks are preventing more revenue coming in by you having to do it. So I know in my experience, um, I was running my books at the start, and I used to, so at the start of the journey, I would be searching on, Rightmove, Zoopla, Facebook, etc. every night after work, and I would be, booking all my viewings and getting on, 25 viewings a week, that sort of thing. As the business built, as we started, getting properties in operation, naturally I was doing guest management. I was doing a few other bits and bobs as well. But then I found myself reconciling the books every night rather than searching for properties. And that for me was the light bulb moment of, there's no wonder that my viewings have dropped from 25 down to 10 a week because I'm not searching for properties anymore. And therefore, I was making less offers, I was acquiring less deals, and ultimately producing less cash flow or new cash flow into the business. So it's really important that you understand where your point is, where your administration work is starting to affect your acquisition flow. And at that point, you've got to recruit somebody for admin, and it will free up your time. You can start people on, a consultancy basis to start off with. You don't need to be employing people full time. And quite often these days, you don't need to be employing people on the books and paying, PAYE and NIC. A lot of these consultants work for other businesses, and therefore, it will not be an issue for you to also hire them as a consultant to start with you and then run your administration. However, what I would say is that you want to try and hire somebody with the thought process that it's only going to get bigger and you're only going to get a lot more units, and therefore you want them to be able to cope with that. So I know a lot of people might say, oh, can I, share your bookkeeper, or can I, share your VA? For me, that's not a good practice, because you want to get the business big enough that that bookkeeper or that VA is going to be working for you full time. So you want to make sure that you're choosing the right person at the beginning, because the last thing you want to do is work with someone for 6 to 12 months, and then your business gets too big for them and they can't cope, and then they decide that they don't want you as a client anymore because they've got all their other clients to serve as well, and your workload's too much for them. And then you've got to start from scratch again. You've got to train people, you've got to show them how to use the systems, the processes, etc. So that's kind of the main thing for me on administration and any roles, really. When you feel like you're not producing income generating tasks anymore because you're getting bogged down in operational stuff, that's the golden moment to say, do you know what, we need to get some help in here. You've always got to be focusing on those IGT tasks. So in terms of cash flow, quite a few people mention that their cash flow is something that they need to keep on top of, because and that rightly so. I always talk about the figures are really important. So cash flow is, it's great to know where your business is going, it's great to know where the profitability is, but it's also good to know how much you've got to be able to then take on new units, or whether you need to go out and find investor money. So I believe you should always be trying to find investor money. I think you should always be looking to try and use other people's money, and by that I also mean credit cards, bank loans, anything like that. At the end of the day, if you're paying, you know, 6, 7, 8% on a credit card or a bank loan, and you can then turn that 8% into, a 17% return on an annual basis, then that for me is a good leverage of money. Whatever the debt cost is, as long as you're going to make more of an ROI on the actual acquisition cost and the running of the operation, then for me that is a good use of money, and I've got no problem doing that. Where people get sort of caught up with credit cards and loans is the majority of people use them for the wrong purposes. So they will use them for buying holidays, buying champagne, and all the stupid things that they then just getting themselves into debt. Then they're paying more money on that debt, and they've not got anything to be paying it off. So that's not what we use the debt for. We leverage other people's money to be able to then make a higher interest. Just so you know, and this is exactly what that bigger businesses do. When you are when businesses buy businesses, so say when you see these figures of so and so bought that business for 40 million, they didn't have 40 million in cash and then buy that business. Typically what will happen is they will borrow 40 million from a bank or a private institution at maybe a rate of 5%, and then they know that that business is currently generating an ROI of say 15%. So they know they're going to make 10% on that money that they borrow by buying that business. And I think it's a bit, you dumb it down to our very simple strategy, whether it's rent to rent or BRR or whatever the sort of base level strategy is that we're trying to operate here, is what's it costing us to borrow the money to be able to then create more money. And as long as there's a profit in the middle, then it's worthwhile investing in. So, but in terms of tracking, this is I'll attach this to the Kajabi link, so you'll be able to download this tracker as well. But in effect, this is kind of how I tend to run stuff. So I would have another sheet down here. I'll just switch this off for a sec. So where it says sheet 1 here, I would also have another sheet here, which would be a nominal code data dump. So if we remember, a couple of weeks ago, we did a session on how to write a spreadsheet formula. Again, this comes in. So from your accountancy software, you would dump your nominal code data in here, which would typically have date, nominal codes, how much it was, descriptions, all that sort of stuff. And then from that, you're feeding here. So these are my nominal codes. And from this, we can feed, do a simple lookup of in January, what was the net wages figure? In January, what was the PAY figure? You can either search on the nominal code or you can search on the name. I'm a big fan of using the numbers because any misspellings, or if you change any of these on your data, whereas these codes don't change. So what I like to do is just look at, okay, well, what's the booked revenue for owned properties, what's the booked revenue for rented properties, and what's the booked revenue for managed properties. Again, you can pull that data from either your channel manager or you can actually pull it from your accountancy software, depending on how you put your sales into that software. And then obviously book revenue for the franchisees, which you got. I then look at what's the estimated property expenses. So I will have a certain figure that I know, but at the same time, we also have the data here, which I'll come on to. So you know roughly what that's going to be. I then know for, say, our managed clients, roughly how much of that revenue we pay out on a monthly basis. So I know what needs to be kept in the client account and what's going to go out of there. And then what I like to know is what my estimated office expenses are. So typically this is kind of the running costs of the business on a monthly basis. And then I look at that so I will total all this up, and then I'll total all this up, and that'll give us a rough net profit of where we are. What I then like to do is at the start of every month, so if I just put a little view on here, freeze this. At the start of every month, bank account number 1. So I have about 10 different bank accounts, but just to keep it simple, I'll put 3 on here. So what's the starting balance at the beginning of the month? What's the end balance, and what's the difference? Naturally, that'll show you what your profitability is. Again, bank account number 2, bank account number 3, and then it will give you a total here of where you started at, what you ended with, and how much your profit was. So that in itself is a snapshot of what your profitability is. So if you're making 10 grand a month or 20 grand a month, that okay, on average I'm making 10-20 grand a month, so I can potentially set up 2 units a month and still have a positive cash flow or a break-even cash flow. But then as you're setting up those 2 extra units, once you get them live, naturally you're going to then have more revenue coming in, so that you then know that okay, if I spend 10,000 out of the 10,000 profit, in the next month I'm going to have an extra 2 units potentially bringing in an extra, say, £1,000 profit. So you've then gone back into profit quite quickly. So it's just about understanding where you're at and what's coming through by your averages. Every month's different. You can never say, okay, well, I'm definitely going to earn that, or I'm definitely going to earn that. We just don't know. There's so many variables in this game, and we just have to make sure that we've got averages that we're working from. And by analyzing the data, you'll be able to see consistent patterns in the numbers. So you'll be able to say, okay, well, I know that on average I'm making 10,000 a month. Some months it's 8, some months it's 12, but on average I'm making 10. So I know that I can go and set up 2 units and I'll still be comfortable. And obviously we'll then add that cash flow in. What I also like to do is, so these are like pretty much all of my nominal codes. So what we like to do is all of these here is just total them up at the end. So again, we'll just figure out, okay, well, what's all this related to? How much was it in January? How much was it in Feb, March, April? And then I can assess it depending on what it is. So things like furniture and fixture additions. What we tend to do is put it in here. We'll have building maintenance, so you'll be able to see roughly what the average initial furniture. So this here, so I'll be able to say, okay, well, I'm spending on average 10 grand a month, but where naturally the sales have started to grow at an X rate. So I know that as a percentage of spend, I tend to add X amount of revenue in. So just by having the data, what starts to happen is you'll start to see all these different figures will pop out, like travel costs, furniture, and then also, I'm a big believer that you can start to, focus on reducing cash expenses by knowing where you're spending your money or where you think you're wasting your money. However, what I would say is don't focus too much on saving costs, because I don't think that's going to add that much profitability into your business. I think your business tends to run at the rate it runs, and you tend to need everything that you've got. Yeah, you might have a software that you don't use anymore, you might be paying for, and you need to get rid of that, or there might be some little figures every now and then, but in the main, I prefer to focus on making more money than trying to reduce the costs. I'm a big believer that if you add a cost in, you just need to make more money. So I see things as units. So I know if I take a new member of staff on, they cost 2 grand a month. I know I need to get ideally 2 or 3 units, maybe 4, depending on the area, to pay for that one member of staff. So that's kind of just the way you might think, but it always just kind of plays itself out, wash itself out. That member of staff might actually be able to then look after 40 to 50 properties. So as a economies of scale, that reduces down, and then they can look after the properties. So it's just understanding your numbers, but if you haven't got the data, you can't analyze it. Once you have the data in here, you can then do very clever things like conditional formatting. So you can have the boxes turn green, red, or orange depending on what certain figures are, i.e. if you were looking at net wages here, you might do a formula that basically says if this figure is greater than the month before, then show it in green or red. So it'll show you roughly whether your wage bill is going up or down. Same for, like, say, your marketing spend, again, green, red, or if it's orange, it'll be the same. So you're just kind of keeping an eye on everything that's happening. Naturally, you want to try and break out as many things as you can. So, like you'll see down in our sort of expense codes, we have, like heat, light, water, power. So we want to say, okay, well, what is that? And if it's going up, which it naturally should as you take more units on, but what is it as a percentage of your revenue coming in? And can you get a better deal with a different supplier? Can you say, okay, well, we seem to be spending X amount of money per property. Can we have a better deal with a different supplier? So that is pretty much how I manage cash flow and look at cash flow. I think also with regards to, say, things like Price Labs is a great tool as well. So on Price Labs, you can have a look at how much booked revenue you've got for that particular, say, week. So you might have, for argument's sake, 50,000 people booked in, staying that week, and the value of that is 50,000. And then it will also tell you what the new booked revenue is. So how much new revenue have you taken in bookings that week? So that could be 60,000. So you know that you've got 50,000 in stay, but you've actually booked 60,000 that week. So at some point in the future, you're going to have a week that is going to bring in £60,000 worth of revenue. And each week you can run with that. And what you tend to see is that the figures are the same. So you can say roughly that, okay, well, if I'm getting around 50,000 a week in stay value, then the way that the booking channels pay out, whether it's, Airbnb, booking.com, your own direct bookings, etc., roughly that you're going to be getting 50,000 every single week into your bank account, because that's what the bookings are showing and that's what the stay date information is showing as well. So you can then manage your cash flow on that. You can look to say, okay, well, does it run similar with this? Are we getting that type of money in each and every week? And if so, what's the profitability of that booking revenue? We know that based on all of this information here that, roughly we take this and, so let's say for argument's sake, if this was 50,000 in booked revenue and we were making 10 grand profit per month, then we know that we make roughly 20% of the booking revenue is our profitability. So if we then, nudge that up to 75 grand, we know that, our profitability is going to be, somewhere around the sort of, what would be 12.5 to 15,000. And then you can kind of know roughly where you're heading in the right or wrong direction. Now, obviously, depending on where you operate as well, depending on what the country is, you're naturally going to have swings in these months. So for the UK, very much, so these 3 months here, very buoyant compared to obviously like November, December, January. Similarly, say Dubai, for example, is very, very bleak here, but then, very, very positive sort of these months here. So, it just depends where you are. No, some place like Florida, very consistent throughout the whole year. So you then need to manage your cash flow based on what's going to be coming in and what's going to be coming out. So, if you're going to be taking a lot more money here, but your costs are not going to change because your costs are your costs. It's not like you can say, okay, well, I don't need you in these, I need you in these months, but I'm going to get rid of you in these months. That's not a business. Your costs are going to be fairly consistent for the 12 months. So from that, you can then see your peaks and troughs in your cash flow. And you might say, okay, well, we're making 10 grand a month on average, but in June, July, August, we're actually making 25 grand. But in November, December, January, we're actually break even on only making a couple of grand. So you might think, okay, well, I need to put away this money here to cover this period here, or the extra money here is going to be used to set up more properties, but knowing that we're not going to probably have any money November, December, January liquid capital based on the cash flow to actually setting the units up around that time. So it's just about understanding where you're at in your numbers. But the more you dig into your numbers, the easier it becomes, and it definitely 100% helps you manage your business, move your business forward, and keep it in a very comfortable cash flow position. There's nothing worse than being stressed about funds. So you want to make sure that you are always, ticking along nicely, that you're always making profit. And if you're not, you need to cut your losses. So, I'm a big believer that, if you've built good relationships with landlords, then you can serve your notices and get out, and it's no hard feelings. It just hasn't worked for whatever reason. So but you need to know your data. You need to know, dig down deeper into each property. What's each property doing? What's their booked revenue each month? What are they? How much is the profitability of that property? Is it making money? Is it losing money? Has it lost money for the last 3 months in a row? If so, that's a good sign to get rid of it. Is it making money consistently? How much is it? Is it worth the hassle, etc., etc.? If it's only making £100 a month and it's taking a lot of time and attention up because it's an old building and there's a lot of guest inquiries on it, there's a lot of complaints on it, it's hindering your reviews. We need to be getting rid of those properties. We need to be getting better stock in there that could be making £500, £750, £1,000 a month. So it's really important that you are on top of your data, and by doing so, then you will be able to manage your business a lot more effectively.